Welcome to the Poetry Box Live. I'm Shawn Aveningo-Sanders, and I'll be your host for tonight's show. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, my husband Robert and I run a small boutique press here in Portland, Oregon, known as the Poetry Box. And we publish about 25 to 30 books per year, and also our annual poetry journal known as the Poeming Pigeon, which is available for pre-order now on our website. The Poetry Box Live is our way of supporting our talented authors to help them connect with a broader audience. And with that said, we are very excited to present three wonderful poets for you today. We have Don Badgley, who'll be reading from New York. Carolyn Martin will be joining us from here in Oregon. And Gary Persessipe, another poet from New York, but he'll be reading here from Oregon. How about that? So let's get started with our first featured. Don Badgley is the author of What Is Not a Miracle. Don Badgley is a lifetime resident of the Hudson Valley in New York State. Raised in a rural setting in a Quaker family, Don is married to his wife, Tracy, and father of two grown daughters, Marissa and Alana. He remains active with the Religious Society of Friends and is the presiding clerk of his local Quaker meeting in Poughkeepsie, New York. Don was encouraged to write poetry by his father and has been writing since his youth. What Is Not a Miracle is his first published collection. Please welcome Don Badgley.
Thank you, Shawn. That's where I have to begin in just thanking Shawn and Robert for allowing me to read for you this evening. And thanks to Robert, particularly for the cover photo of this book. The moment I saw it, I knew it was the cover photo for this book. I think Shawn knew too. This is a first for me. The book is a first for me. I have no reviews. I have no memberships. I have no credentials beyond this small book. I do have the kindness shown by Poetry Box in deciding to publish it, and that's good enough for me. As with all poetry shared on this platform, and I've seen a lot of it, this is a labor of love for me. It's also something of a spiritual exercise, a way to share my sense of the ineffable and eternal source of all there is. My life as a Quaker cannot be separated from these creations. And in that sense, I suppose it's intended as something of a ministry. I trust the poems to speak for themselves. In some sense, all of these brief works are a single poem that strives to point in the same direction, into the light. Kierkegaard offers this as context. It's one of my favorite quotations. A human being is a synthesis of the infinite and the finite, of the temporal and the eternal. I begin today with the last poem in the collection. It's called Reach. Dear friends, let us reach. Reach toward the stillness. Stillness that reveals the light. Light discovered within. Within the perfect oneness. Oneness with the eternal. Eternal, single moment. Moment of endless grace. Everything I write arises from what we Quakers call the inner light, but also from an inward light. I call this the spark. My walk through life, sometimes a run, sometimes a crawl, and sometimes slinking backward toward the shadows, has ever been lighted by a sense of my being more than a lump of sentient glop. And even when cowering in the shadow of despair, there is that flash of certainty, like a single sparkle on pristine snow, that speaks of something bright and constant that remains untouched within me, safe, unafraid, and essential. And there I rest, recover, and trust to the infinite, from which and to which I ever rise. These next 4 very brief poems are simply reflections of miraculous moments. I don't know what else to call them in nature. The first is called Dragonfly. I was at a conference and during a break went out on the lawn to sit. A dragonfly appeared as I was being still and lighted on my shoe to prophesy. She was older than the dinosaurs and still connected to the timeless source. She didn't speak, but cocked 100 eyes at me and encouraged me to laugh. Owl. Somewhere in the dark, beyond my open summer window, an owl proclaimed her victory, or perhaps a celebration of the night near done, her crop just filled, high above the now empty den of one that will never see again the coming dawn. My favorite season, all those who know me know, is autumn. Fall in the Northeast is pretty spectacular. This is called The Sun Though Low. It was one of those autumn days that forces pause to celebrate. The sun, now low in the southern sky, was striking bright, rejoicing and remaining gold and crimson ornaments. Then, as if to censure me and the eternal king of light, a churning wave of clouds and rain consumed the world with the suddenness of a bully's slap, conjuring a gloom and dark reminder of a deeper chill, certain yet to come. Then the moment passed, and glancing upward from my scribbling, the king had momentarily returned, just to cover every twig in diamonds. I also like the spring. This is called Light Rain. This afternoon's light rain, almost a mist, might bring sadness, except that the dogwood splashed against the new green rivals the absent sun, and the finches chatter in celebration. Of course, sometimes the affairs of the world impact what arises for me. These next few are examples of that. I begin with one that is not in the book. I was kind of scanning things recently. And this was written in a different time. Or were they so different? Ronald Reagan was president. This sonnet was written 34 years ago. It's called Democracy's Tears. Cry not for leaders who forget and fall into the dust of their own arrogance. They are but passing players who advance beyond the well-intentioned trumpet call to change. And all is changed as they install new plans to cure the poor inheritance of predecessor fools, and then entrance themselves on power born of poor recall. Cry not for these, no, cry for other fools who follow blind, remaining credulous, and cry for anyone who ridicules dissent or labels it as traitorous, for they would have us be unthinking tools. Should such prevail, then cry for all of us. And speaking of weeping, I just realized as I was putting this together, it's been 15 years since Iraq executed Saddam Hussein. When my then 15-year-old daughter heard about it, she wept. It made her sad. And this poem followed quickly thereafter. It's called Weep for the Executioner. Weep for the executioner, weep for the cheering mob reaching for death, weep for the condemned, now reduced to frailty. And when you have wept yourself dry and gasp for air, raise your eyes to heaven, the source of love-inspired tears, and know that the ocean of light was never touched by darkness. Then weep again for joy. This next was written during the first Gulf War. I was watching Bush the First acting righteous in a Rose Garden speech. This is called Spring in the Rose Garden. Spring comes quietly to an arid land, where through the barren ground a single bloom pushes forth to light and fragile life, trembling crimson in a perfect hope. A sudden shadow reaches out to her, and a boot heel crushes this small miracle beneath the warrior, towering above, he blossoming and brave at 20 years. The enemy, unseen, contains his rage. His certainty perfects unhurried aim, and hollow pointed steel spits out its curse into the flowering face of youthful dreams. And there, upon his knees, another dies, as blood and darkened petals merge in dust. And in a distant land, the leader prays into the rose and cherry scented air. I travel a lot, and I witnessed something in the Milwaukee airport that by the time I was home, this was on paper. Airport evangelical. Two men whose accents placed their berths beyond my shores were struggling to understand their assailant's passion. One tried in vain to say that good is good, that love is love, but she discounted that and beat them mercilessly with her certainty and brochure scripture that threatened hell and counseled fear, all in the name of He, the one who died to prove His grace and love. And I smiled for them all, keeping still. We Quakers are mostly pacifists and refuse military service as incompatible with divine love and with Jesus' ministry. That can be difficult to explain to some. This is called He Asked Me to Explain. He asked me to explain with a note of confident derision. He asked me to explain how I and we could be so naive as to reject the machines of war that make our nation safe and great. He asked me to explain what I would do when the other came to destroy our holy Constitution and slaughter my family and his. He asked me to explain. And I could not explain the experience of sacred light that reorders us to offer love even to our enemies. I could only point toward the source that can only explain itself. These next two were inspired just by two young women I observed in my travels. The first is called Tetawobka. The infant at her breast was unaware, except of warmth and sustenance that he accepted as his right as Lord. And she, though but a child herself, was resting in the certainty of a peace as ancient as the universe newborn, before constraints of space and time could separate the light from dark, and only love was infinite. She lights the room. She lights the room in dreadlocked youth, easy with her power and devoid of artifice or wiles, a silent pool of strength springing up from deep that speaks of inward peace and quiet certainty. I never knew who she was. All I know is what I saw. I'm going to finish today with the title poem. It's called What Is Not a Miracle, as is the book, which if I'd had any sense, I would have held up for you, but it's in the chat. At any rate, what is not a miracle? What is not a miracle? Must I look to the stars or holy books, or measure my poor understanding by the infinite unknown? Must I witness the healing of the lame or blind, or the raising of the dead? Is the air I breathe not wonder enough? And is my own clear sight an insufficient gift to perceive the falling leaf or sunlight captured by the dew? Should I discount the scent of rain in spring, or the music of spoken love, or the fullness of the universe just beneath the petal of a rose? I am profoundly grateful for your attention, and again, the Poetry Box. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Well, you wouldn't guess that that was your first reading, because that was beautiful. And Don, your poems instill such a state of calm within me when I read them. There's one poem in the book that I don't think you read tonight, but I hope those of you who have the book or will be ordering the book will. And there's a poem called The Mountain of Peace. And it has such a wonderful, hopeful message of love and compassion that we need to get through the tough times together, and how we lift each other up. And the message of that poem, and so many of your poems, are just so inspirational and so moving and so needed, because I think we're all searching for that light right now. And I really appreciate this very much. So thank you for sharing your work with us today.
Very grateful.
Our next featured poet is Carolyn Martin, author of The Catalog of Small Contentments. From associate professor of English to management trainer to retiree, Carolyn Martin has journeyed from New Jersey to Oregon to discover Douglas firs, months of rain, and dry summers. After years of writing academic papers and business books, she discovered that poetry is the way her mind interacts with the world, in images, rhythms, sounds, and intensities of language. Carolyn's poems have appeared in more than 130 journals and anthologies throughout North America, Australia, and the UK. She currently serves as poetry editor of Cosmos Quarterly, Journal for Global Transformation. Her chapbook, Nothing More to Lose, was released by the Poetry Box earlier this year. It's my pleasure to please welcome Carolyn Martin.
Thank you, Shawn. I have to start out, Don, with saying I'm going to steal your line, reach toward the stillness, and I'm going to make copies of that line, and I'm going to plaster every room of the house with that, because that's the message I know I need in our world today, reach toward the stillness. So thank you so much for that. And Shawn and Robert, just got the book on Tuesday. This is my third publication with the Poetry Box, and they never cease to amaze me with the talent, the quality, the insight, the support. So thank you so much. It's such an honor to be part of the Poetry Box's community. So I'd like to start with the first poem in the book. I wrote this poem back in April of 2020, when we were just starting to hear about the deaths from COVID. So this poem is called Mandate. To those of you who will not die today, walk through your home and bless the open doors, the table set, the breath of sun lounging on the Persian rug. Catalog the small contentments you have earned, eager words vying for a poem, work you'll never have to do again, backyard squirrels that entertain. Praise every squill, crocus, and bleeding heart that dares subvert winter's calendar. Invite young mysteries in and seat them between answers you have no questions for and ponderables still unclassified. It goes with saying, listen attentively. Then tomorrow, if it arrives, repeat. The second poem in the book takes a completely different tone and pacing. And before I read it, I have to show you one word that appears in the poem. And that word is summarizing. I don't know about you, but normally I see summarizing with an A, as in creating a summary. But this is a homonym. It's a word that sounds the same, but has a completely different meaning. You all know what winterizing means, to get your house or your car, whatever, ready for winter. Well, summarizing is the same thing for summer. So getting your garden or getting your home ready for the summer season. So when you hear that in the poem, it's this spelling of the word. So here's the poem. Breaking news, God's rewilding plan leaked. According to a source high up and anonymous, God will announce this week he is rewilding the earth. He confesses he should have rested on day 6 while he was on a cosmic roll, and laments he missed the signs. Bipeds blinkered by supremacy would try to tame everything. He admits to Verta and invertebrates his human trial flopped. Therefore, next Sunday, pandas, peacocks, and silverbacks will play in Times Square, and caravans of antelope will race across Pennsylvania Avenue. Every boundary line, dam, trellis, and mended wall will rumble down. Steel, asphalt, and concrete will be banished heretofore. So will summarizing gardens everywhere. Believe what you like about our superiority. God made a mistake. He should have advised Adam and Eve not to procreate and lounge them beneath the apple tree, where they'd spend their 10 score years in blissful innocence rather than sweat through parental anxiety. Between you and me, I'd support a God as transparent as this. If his plan succeeds, find me hanging out, waggishly naked and wild, on the edge of some post-paradise, with monkeys, giraffes, dolphins, elephants, koalas, and birds of every size. Fun poem. As any artist knows, inspiration can be found anywhere you look. And the next poem was inspired by a children's book by Khalid Hussaini, and it's called Sea Prayer. I knew Hussaini from his novel, his astonishing novel, The Kite Runner, and I didn't know that he wrote children's books. And this is an extraordinarily beautiful, touching, and beautifully illustrated children's book. So the poem, after I read this, became, after reading Khalid Hussaini's Sea Prayer. Before I could read or knew the word refugee, my Russian father tossed me into waves along the Jersey shore. Safe in his sight, I learned to navigate over, under, with. No need to pray to any God. Here now, miles of time away from sand and waves and my father's eyes, Hussaini's Not for Children, children's book. On Syria's sea edge, a father holds his son. Rumors of wildflowers, olive trees, goats and cows, market smells, 1,000 boyhood dreams drown in city ruins, where craters masquerade as swimming pools, and believers and non share slits of sun slipping through bricks and beams. Dogs are feral now, and death sleeps in every house, in every room, and I can barely bear to read the Father's prayer. All he asks, when land slips away and their boat heaves and tilts, safety for his child, a simple parent's simple plea, safe passage for his son. But I want to scream, what's this praying worth? When indifferent gods have failed to guide 10,000 souls across indifferent seas, what is praying worth? I snap the book shut and conjure up my dad. We grab our bathing suits and crash through resistant waves. We're bound to save one determined boat from an unwelcoming sea. Thank you. Another source of inspiration arrived on an airplane 9 years ago. We were flying to Maui and met a family, a mother, a father, and 2 daughters, age 7 and age 3. And I engaged the mom in conversation, and she kept talking about 3 children. And when she saw that I was a bit confused, she explained that she always says 3 because their only son had died 4 years earlier at the age of 2 of a rare form of cancer. And as she told me the process of going through that death and comforting her children and her own grief, needless to say, I was in tears. And in the 9 years after that event, I actually wrote 3 poems that use some of the details in her story. And this poem I'm going to read is the 3rd and I think the final poem in that trilogy. And as with each of the other poems, it has some facts about her story, and I add my own imagination about what grief for this woman would be like. The poem is called Hollow. A mother never loses loss. My mantra since our baby died. My husband cannot hear the screams I bury in basement walls or divine what my half smiles mean. 4 years, he's numb to my despair. I despise the peace he has become. We take our boy's ashes everywhere. His sisters are convinced he wants to go. They travel sticker every inch of cherry wood and entertain with how they rescue turtle eggs hatching in Los Cabos sun and cheer the ape rocking her newborn in San Diego Zoo. How they giggled at male elk bugling for mates across a Rocky Mountain field and fed fistfuls of hay to nudging goats at 4-H. 7 and 3, they talked to him as much as they talked to me. 2 girls, 1 boy, I always say, when strangers like the woman on the plane or the couple moving in next door seem confused, seeing only 2, I seize the opening. 2 years old, in our arms, in our bed. If curiosity invites, I explain his rare disease and how we prayed to keep him warm. What I won't admit, I lock my bedroom door and trace his outline on our sheets a dozen times a day. What a gift that woman and that family was to me as a poet. Some of the funnest poems that I've been able to write have been of the cut and paste variety, where I would grab a list of things, cut them up, and rearrange. For example, I had one poem that was based upon the most admired lines in poetry, or the most famous last words of the last words of people who have died. They've been fun, and this one I came up with recently, looking at American proverbs for some reason, just Googled American proverbs. So the poem is called Variety Is and 21 Other Proverbs. But I'm not going to read all 21 to you. I just going to do some cutting and pasting of my own. So here is my mishmash of proverbs. Variety is the spice. Cleanliness is next. Heaven helps those who don't bite the hand that feeds them. People in glass houses should hope for the best. There is no place like home for a free lunch. If you can't beat them, practice harder. You made your bed, now scratch my back. Familiarity breeds the best things in life. The pen is mightier than a squeaky wheel. You have to kiss a lot of toads to starve a fever. When the going gets tough, make love. There are two theories about arguing with a woman. Try putting the cat back into a bag, or the better part of valor, get out of the kitchen. And a very recent source of inspiration is the fact that I'm getting older. So old age is one of the grist for the mill of writing. I have to show you another word that appears that I love, and I don't know if you've seen this word before. The word is sky glow. And sky glow means that you're in an area of light pollution so that you can't see the stars. So anybody that knows about city life, and the sky glow just blots out the stars. So as you'll hear, the sky glow is going to de-star every city's nights. Sky glow. I stole a line from the incredible, infamous Betty Davis for the title of this poem. This poem is called Old Age Ain't No Place for Sissies, Betty Davis. We know our place. Any time of day, words stall between the brain and tongue, and spelling turns into a phonics game. We can't stop our skin from crinkling while we sleep, or knees complaining they're abused. Even when we squint, we confuse a pine cone for a bird. Auditory skills we've perfected. Say again. Though earthquakes everywhere and sky glow to stars every city's nights, we've done well. We've relegated drama to Hulu and Netflix and made love visible to those with eyes to see. We've lined up friends to scavenge through our left behinds before final trips to Goodwill. For now, we've earned old age bravery by claiming our place in the cosmic scheme. After intimate chats with perennials, we're convinced death's impermanent. Cheers to parades of sissies passing by. Thank you for listening, and may all of your days be filled with an abundance of small contentments. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Carolyn. That was moving and funny and educational. We learned some new words, a little bit of everything. And, I keep a stack of poetry books. uh, near my bed. And on those mornings when I'm feeling blue, that's where I turn maybe to grab a poem to start the day to kind of help get things going. And there are books by Billy Collins and Mary Oliver and Ross Gay, Ellen Bass, all of my favorites. Well, now I add Carolyn Martin to that stack because I can open any page of the catalog of small contentments, confident that a poem will make me chuckle, teach me something new, or simply lift my spirits. So thank you for bringing a little bit more contentment into our world. Our final feature tonight is Gary Persessipe. Gary is the author of a new poetry book, Gaslight Opera, plus 11 other books, including Moratorium, a short story collection forthcoming from Atmosphere Press. He is the associate editor at New World Writing, which is formerly Mississippi Review. Prior to that, he was an assistant fiction editor at Antioch Review. His work has appeared in many, many places, including Brevity, Story Quarterly, the Greensboro Review, Camera Obscura, Pank, the Good Man Project, and other places. He resides in White Plains, New York, and teaches philosophy at Fordham University in the Bronx. It is my pleasure to welcome Gary Persessipe.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shawn. I don't know what to say. I mean, Don and Carol, that was awesome. I want to thank both of you. I'm just honored to be on this platform, and to Shawn, who does so much for poetry. I mean, this is really a gift, right? With the poetry boxes, and to all who support her, Robert and everybody, bringing poetry to people. I'm very excited to be, this I think is my second book with Poetry Box, and I tell all my friends about it. All right, so Gaslight Opera. This book has shifted and changed through the years. It's a long collection, it's a big collection, and it's dedicated to Mark Strand, gifted poet, and to his teacher, my friend, Nolan Miller at Antioch. I have to say that I just learned that Bob Fogarty died at the Antioch Review. Many may know Bob's work at the Antioch Review. It was Bob who brought me in to Antioch Review. I want to remember him tonight, as well as Mark and Nolan, to whom this collection, Gaslight Opera, is collected. It's a little manic in starting. There's a lot of prose poems, which is my favorite form, to do whatever I want, genre bending craziness, mostly antic, zany poems. I'll read you one of those, and then the book hits kind of a solemn section, and there are lots of different forms, but there are a couple of villanelles. I'll read one of the villanelles, my favorite form, and then concluding poem. So this prose poem is called Situation Room. Two men in blue serge suits sat roasting at the station. Overhead, an enormous fan turned slowly under a constellated sky. Edgar was newly retired from the physics department at the new school. He smoked a briarwood pipe and blew smoke rings through the air, obsessed with a new geometry supple enough to spread malaise throughout the universe. Brother Alley-oop surveyed the passing crowd, pausing to admire portraits of presidents mounted in the Beaux-Arts lobby, Grand Central. People and luggage moved swiftly through the station with the occasional dog. A needle-nosed man in a stovepipe hat gestured up at Orion's belt and remarked, "This is America, content with a progressive tax code and cars with chrome wings, each citizen a locker room of numbskull ideas like perfume in a toothpaste cap." Edgar nodded at the topper and worked his math. Mayonnaise spread like the silent prayer of a Buddhist or a Quaker. From alley-oop, not a bang nor a whimper, more a slow leak of fluid. Alley-oop saluted the stiffening substance dripping from the door hinge of the station master. His cell phone buzzed. It was the president wanting to speak with Edgar. Have you noticed the mayo? The president said. Edgar allowed it as how, well, yes, he had. Just act like nothing's going on, the president said. Edgar handed me the phone. The president repeated, nothing is happening. See? Yes, Mr. President, I said. My tongue was flecked with mayo. It roamed north of my lips, and I extended my tongue to capture what I could while holding the phone down to my head and nodding to Edgar. The sun travels all day, then falls down, Eliud whispered in my wet ear. I won't let on, I told the president, even if they torture me. I immediately regretted the word torture, but it was too late for a quick edit. Edgar giggled. A crowd gathered. Eliud stood to his feet, applauding. Someone started singing Elvira. Edgar supplied the papa, banging his pipe on his shoe. The sudden pressure to act normal never seemed harder. I thought fondly of my washing machine, a Kenmore, newly installed in my basement beside the dryer, both of them sporting normal buttons. That helped. We will get through this, I said to the phone. Thank you. There are a lot zanier than that, but thank you, Eliud, and what's his name? So this is a villanelle. I mean, villanelles are so wonderful because they're so dramatic, right? I mean, who doesn't love a villanelle? From Elizabeth Bishop, One Art, to Mark Strand, who was the master of villanelles, to lots of French poets we could name, but will not. This is called The Hand. And the night as a hand slid over your face. You always wonder where you will die. This lunatic world is one last good trace of galactic empires inserted in space, little clouds white at the end of the sky, and the night as a hand slid over your face. Your grandson zooms a plea to embrace the last bit of solace your heart wants to try. This lunatic world is one last good trace. Uranus begs to be draped in black lace. Saturn is dying for whiskey and rye, and the night is a hand slid over your face. They sold Lake Tahoe to some guy named Mace, who wanted to rent, but decided to buy. This lunatic world is one last good trace. Hercules dials a bid to replace. He's put on hold and begins to cry, and the night is a hand slid over your face. This lunatic world is one last good trace. One more antic poem. I actually like this poem. I couldn't resist Shawn putting this into the reading tonight. God knows where this came from, with apologies to Herman Melville. This is called Captain Ahab Surveys the Damage at the Press Conference. The women in the back wore dead smiles. They all had the superior look of people out of work. A sign hung in the hallway said, "No suicides permitted here." Heavy-hearted cheers arose from the gem-colored polos in the front. Ahab mounted the podium like fate into the lone Atlantic. He spoke at length of the permitting stars which weave round them tragic graces. Reporters glared back, crucifixion in their eyes. Ahab's face was a pale, half-aloof face. "Avast!" he cried. Sing out for new stars. Will you be requiring all Americans to wear masks, sir? Someone asked. Mask, flask, stormed the captain. Then was heard a terrific, loud animal sob, like that of a heart-stricken moose. It was the Attorney General, hot as Satan's hoof. Stand by me, Starbuck prayed, his Quaker voice a tremble. Hold me, blind me, oh ye blessed influences. Ahab rode on into the wind. Snowflakes tumbled in feathery confusion, wonderfully white against the night, smothering the whole dirty, roaring, guilty city in innocence and silence, like the unabated Hudson when that noble Northman flows narrowly but unfathomably through Poughkeepsie. The virus was alluded to, never mentioned, but it was the whiteness of the thing that above all appalled, said Flask. This whiteness, said the third mate, keeps her ruins forever new. Flask, Flask, roared Ahab. Flask is a butterless man. Again, with apologies to Herman Melville and Moby Dick. All right, with Reese's help, we're going to close out with the concluding poem. This was originally titled The Delirium Waltz. I later changed it in honor of Mark Strand, who already had that title, to Waltz du Temps Perdu. This is a pantoum. I cannot remember the hour. The tables were shining with laughter. An orchestra assembled on the wide polished floor, which was dusted with snow. Players sat down in their places. The chandeliers flickered and dimmed, and someone was saying, "It's time," while others were staring outside where the street had meandered away. Soon shapes appeared in the shadows where monuments struggled to walk. The conductor arose from the dark and stood at the podium. When the music started to play, I'd thought it would never arrive, but everyone waited to see who would get up and walk to the dance. The path to the dance floor seemed endless, and someone was leading the way. The stars were still shining for us outside, but no one could say who we were. Soon bodies were twisting and turning and gliding around on the floor. Our clothes were heavy. The music was slow. We seemed happy, though couldn't say why. But I felt like death had been cheated, or at least made to wait at the door. Whether we danced away to the future or back to the past, who could say? It seemed harmless to just keep on dancing, and the light was much better at last. I may have been leading, at least for a while, until it seemed we had been dancing forever. The slightest hint of a smile had a history now. We grimaced and sighed, dipped or bowed from the waist. Snow spumed away from our shoes, and the wind of our bodies spun us around the floor. As we picked up speed, the room grew larger and without dimensions, and still we kept gliding and gliding, whoever we were. We were there. And Frederick and Flora appeared, and the dance was slow. And joining them now, Homer and Edith and Ronald, dear Ronald, was dancing and smoking, and the dance was slow. And into the hall years later came Marie and Gus, and Ronald, dear Ronald, was dancing and smoking, and Gerald and Sarah were toppled together. And into the hall years later came Marie and Gus, swaying together and turning and turning. And Gerald and Sarah were toppled together, and Vincent and Ange and Janet swaying together and turning and turning. Then came John, long and thin, and Vincent and Ange and Janet and Jim, everyone moving, everyone dancing. Then came John, long and thin, across the snow floor, everyone moving, everyone dancing. Ernest was there, and so was Kathleen. Across the snow floor, looking better than ever, came Zelda and Scott. Ernest was there, and so was Kathleen. And Stephen and Gerard had just gotten back, looking better than ever, came Zelda and Scott. Lincoln, Lance, and Ann Beatty, and Jim, and Stephen and Gerard had just gotten back, and others were there. Lincoln, Lance, Ann Beatty, and Jim, William and Judy were dancing and dancing, and others were there. Lincoln, Lance, Ann Beatty, and Jim, William and Judy were dancing and dancing, and others were there wearing their best. William and Judy were drinking and dancing. Ree and Frederick, Beck and Kathy wearing their best, around and around, dancing and dancing. And our shadows drifted away towards sunset till birds on telephone wires stopped singing and darkened the sky, while fish breath smelled stale in the air near our heads, smelled of almonds, then oranges and taffy and boardwalk, then finally rotting fruit. Dust stuck to the canvas mounted in the corner, and dark clouds rose high as a house and higher. We stood and watched the others afloat on the sea. From distant rafts, they were calling, hello, hello, as they sailed by. And may we have this dance, white stars. And then off they went to another room with walls of robin egg blue. And one floor led to another, and doves flew back and forth. Soldiers roamed the veranda under the boughs of trees, and doves flew back and forth. A greenish haze was everywhere under the boughs of trees, and Johnny was there with Arlene. A greenish haze was everywhere, and Lucette and Mary were dancing, and Johnny was there with Arlene. Earthlings must always be pale, they said. And Lucette and Mary were dancing, and Connie and Kevin were talking. Earthlings must always be pale, they said, but pale turns round to fair. And Connie and Kevin were talking, saying that blue slides into black, but pale turns round to fair. And Nick was there in heels, saying that blue slides into black. Georgiana was there, and Margot, and Nick was there in heels, and day and night were one. Georgiana was there, and Margot, and Ralphie, and Perry were there, and day and night were one. And the ocean's green body was near, and Ralphie and Perry were there, and Frank and Lauren were dancing, and the ocean's green body was near. Hello out there, hello. And Frank and Lauren were dancing, so thin they were and light. Hello out there, hello. Can anyone hear out there? And water rushed into the ballroom from every direction, in sound-splitting waves, rinsing the snow and crashing into furniture. And I felt as if the sea extended from me alone, and that I was a watery grave. and the moon's light was blocked by the leaning towers, perfectly shattered, and the earth reeled like a drunken man. The foundations of the world were shaken, but we went on dancing with moves we had memorized as breakers flashed white and specks fell from heavens open to receive human dust. It grew cold, and then I was back with the others. The green sea receded, a kingdom of water gave way, and then suddenly we were left alone. They floated over the floor, and the china rattled a little. Oh, how they moved together. The chandelier shook in the draft, and the china rattled a little. So many doors were open. The chandelier shook in the draft. Nobody knew what would happen. So many doors were open, and there was Rosalie dancing. Nobody knew what would happen. And Rawl waltzed into the room, and there was Rosalie dancing, and Doug and Jen were waiting. Now Rawl waltzed into the room. The years would come and go, and Doug and John were waltzing. Hours and hours would pass. The years would come and go. The trees in the hallway rustled. Hours and hours would pass. Now enter the children of Mary. The trees in the hallway rustled. And here were the children of Gabe. Now enter the children of Mary. There was nothing to do but dance. And here were the children of Gabe. And Pia was telling them something. There was nothing to do but dance. They would never lie down together. And Pia was telling them something. And many who dreamed they could would never lay down together. The season of dancing was endless, and many who dreamed they could would never be able to stop. I cannot remember the hour or day. The light burned the fog away. We were walking across the wide polished floor, inlaid with marble, and statuary stood on the stage. Through shallow water and dusting of snow, we advanced as clouds gathered in gray. I cannot remember, but I think you were there, whoever you are today.
Wow, Gary. I tell you, this book is pure zany fun. And your poems and prose are full of such beautifully strange images and such unexpected turns. And that last poem, I mean, I could just feel my body wanting to waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I mean, the rhythm of it and all the names and all the people that were there, you just felt like you were part of a party. And it's quite magical, I have to say. You are quite the entertaining storyteller, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your vast imagination with us today. So thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Risa.
I want to thank all of our fantastic poets tonight. You guys were great. And thank you to our audience for joining us for another edition of the Poetry Box Live. You know, as poets and authors have been impacted by the closures of bookstores and limited reading venues across the country, it really means the world to us that you joined us here to celebrate their poetry on Zoom. So next month, our show will be on Saturday, September 11th at 4 p.m. Pacific. And our featured poets will be Susan Coltrette McQuinn, Marsha B. Loughran, and Elizabeth McBride. And to keep up to date on all of our upcoming shows, new releases, and submission opportunities, please subscribe to our newsletter by going to thepoetrybox.com And you'll go to the bottom of any of the web pages and you'll see a sign up form where you can sign up for the newsletter. Thanks again for joining us today. If you want to unmute yourself and chat with the poets, feel free. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. We'll see you next month.
Thank you all. This was great.
Thanks, everybody.
Great.
Thank you, Shawn.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Robert.
Really wonderful.
Great reading this evening.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I enjoyed it so much. Thank you.
Good. Thank
Good
you.
to see you,
Thank you.
Carolyn.
Good to see you too, Mary Jo. Go to bed.